Welcome to the Not Old Better Show, the show covering all things health, wellness, culture, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better, not older. Now, here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelzang.
Thank you so much, and welcome to the Not Old Better Show, Art of Living interview series. I am Paul Vogelzang. Our guest today, Anthony Horowitz, has spent a lifetime doing something very few writers ever manage. He keeps surprising us. Interestingly, I love this factoid about Anthony Horowitz, he may have committed more fictional murders than any living author. That's fantastic. But what makes his career so remarkable is not simply the body count. It's the range, the invention, and the restless imagination behind it. Anthony Horowitz is the creator of Foyle's War, a writer for Foyle, a developer of Midsummer Murders, the author of the wildly successful Alex Rider series, and the mind behind new adventures for Sherlock Holmes, James Bond, Daniel Hawthorne, Susan Ryland, and Atticus Pund. And here's what makes Anthony Horowitz such a fascinating guest for us today. After decades of success, he is still pushing himself. These are just great themes for our Not Old Better Show audience because Anthony Horowitz is still trying new structures. He's still playing fair with readers while finding fresh ways to fool them. His newest work, including Marble Hall Murders and a deadly episode, we're going to talk about that today, reminds us that a great mystery is never just about a crime. It's about memory, identity, risk, reinvention, and the question every creative person eventually faces. How do you keep growing without losing what made you special in the first place? For many of us in the Not Old Better Show audience, especially those in our later chapters, that question feels very personal. What does it mean to begin again, to trust a new idea, to keep creating with joy and purpose? Today we're talking about storytelling, second acts, hidden clues, and the enduring pleasure of a brilliant twist. Please join me in welcoming the very brilliant, award-winning author, Anthony Horowitz. Anthony Horowitz, it is so great to see you. Good to talk to you. Congratulations on all of your work, and thanks for joining us today.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Gosh, so much to talk about. Your career, like spring, is in full bloom. You've got this wonderful new book that you've shared with me, A Deadly Episode. I have read it and enjoyed it so much. I really appreciate you sharing it with me. So much to talk about the book. But I want to start with this often used descriptor of you, and you could just be bored to tears hearing this, but people say it all the time that you have committed more fictional murders than any living author, and I think that that's maybe a good place to start because I want to take a jump from that and just talk about the subject of reinvention, one that my audience is very interested in. I kind of reinvented myself, and across your career, you've written just Foyle's War and Midsummer Murders, all of this Alex Rider work, which is just fantastic, Sherlock Holmes. I was struck by this idea of reinvention and how it might apply to you. And so I just want to say, does it feel like a second act for you as you kind of make jumps into these various styles and writing?
Well, I'm not sure it's a second act. I mean, thinking of the age, I might say it feels more like Act 5, actually, in a sort of a Greek tragedy or whatever, or a comedy. I don't know which quite yet. I don't. I think that it's a. I don't see it as anything more than a growth. You know, I started writing when I was published for the first time when I was 21. That's pretty much 50 years ago now. And in that time, I haven't so much reinvented myself because I have, yeah, all I've ever done is write. I have written and I have written and I have written. It's all I do. But I'm hoping that I have written in a way that reinvents the genre and reinvents ideas and moves things forward. I hope I've got better as a writer. I think that's the most important thing is to grow, to learn, to push your boundaries, to find new ideas, things that excite you more. So it's not to just spend, for example, Paul, I could have spent the last 30 years just writing Alex Rider. Alex Rider was my biggest hit. It sold about 20 million books when it was out and, at its peak. And I could now have done 25 of those books and I could be guaranteed that each one would sell and would be a success, pretty much. Obviously, if it would have to be good. But that to me is abhorrent. I mean, to me, reinvention, changing, testing yourself, doing new things, trying new waters, challenging yourself, that's the excitement. I've always said writing is an adventure. And for me, that's what it's always been.
I love the mystery genre so much. And of course, A Deadly Episode really takes that and goes to a new level. We'll talk about that. But I want to talk about this idea of kind of murder mystery as a setting, because you've taken us so many places with that. Foyle's War takes us into this very inhabited World War II experience. You talk about corruption and memory and class and identity and all of those great things. What is it about the murder mystery that lets you do that? And maybe perhaps other forms can't do it as well?
I think all literary forms can operate on the same level, and one is not necessarily superior to another. If there is one thing that murder mystery allows me as a writer to do, it's to move quickly. When you write a murder mystery, you're dealing with, let us start, the obvious, a murder. And a murder immediately starts breaking down boundaries, tearing open curtains, because when somebody murders somebody else, they're hiding secrets. One of them is obviously hiding the secret of who they are, but they might also be hiding the reason for the murder. And you begin to ask all sorts of questions about the person who has been murdered. So unlike any other genre that I can think of, you get a sort of a rush into the world that you wish to describe. And murder is nobody reads a murder book because they enjoy murder itself. Murder is horrible. But nonetheless, what they do enjoy is the opportunities for exploration that follow. And I think that, in a funny way, makes murder mystery pretty unique, really. And the other great thing about it is that murder mysteries do not deal in, shall we say, small emotions, in sort of slight feelings. You don't murder somebody because you are a little bit upset with them or because you are slightly afraid of them. You murder them for big reasons. It's a big thing to do. It's a very, it will change not just the person you kill, their life, but your life too. You will be, for the rest of your life, a killer. So that sort of big emotional stage, the speed of movement within it, those are the things that appeal to me.
The other thing that is within it, certainly with regard to your books, is this idea of a book within a book. And I noticed Marble Hall Murders, the trilogy, it just feels like this very classic detective story, but it's also a very sly, I'll say, examination of the genre itself. What excites you about this book within a book structure? Because it's really so well done, and I love it. It really keeps my mind working. It's got to stay fresh for you, though, too.
Well, I think you've answered your own question in a way, because getting the mind working and actually being fresh are the two reasons for doing it. But I'm working in an area which is called metafiction, and it's not a word I particularly like, because I think it sounds complicated and it sounds beside the point, which is to entertain and to keep people guessing and to have fun. But nonetheless, when I was writing a TV show many years ago called Midsummer Murders, I became sort of interested in the idea of why people watched the show. Why would somebody give 2 hours of their afternoon up to watch a detective ask questions and to come away just with the thought of the butler did it? Is that what it all adds up to? Why should I spend 3 months writing a script or a year and a half writing a book if all it is just to get to that conclusion the killer was so-and-so? So I began to ask myself all sorts of questions about the genre itself, as to why, for example, murder interests us. Why is it that if there is a murder in the street outside your home and you come out in the morning and you see a police car and you see police tape and you see an ambulance and maybe there is blood on the street and a body covered with a cloth, you're not going to say, hey, this is great, isn't it? And smile and have a laugh about it. You're going to be a little bit shocked, horrified. But if you read that as an opening of a book, you are entertained. And I'm fascinated by the journey from reality into fiction and what happens to one of the worst things in the world, killing somebody. And I had this idea of the Magpie murders and Moonflower murders and now and Marble Hall murders because it was allowed me to look at murder through a literary lens, a book within a book, but a murder within a murder as well. So it allows me, as it were, to sort of examine the entire world while still reveling in it and enjoying it.
Well, you mentioned Midsummer Murders and television and your work there, and and I learned in my research of you that Marble Hall Murders, just we've been talking about, took just 6 months to write that because a television series was coming, was imminent, and yet Marble Hall Murders, you talk about it really taking much, much more time. And so I wonder, what is it about the pressure of creativity that kind of keeps you going and that drives you? And what has it taught you about kind of using your instinct there?
I think what it's taught me, and I'm very lucky, is that the ideas just come. That you don't need to panic, you don't need to have writer's block, you don't need to sort of be afraid because somehow, in a magical way that I don't fully understand, the ideas come. Now, the time you're talking about, I had a problem, which was that Leslie Manville, the star of the TV shows, only had a certain period in which she could film with us, and that was very, very near. And I had to write the book very quickly because I couldn't adapt the TV scripts from nothing. I had to have a book for it. And I still remember walking with my dog along the River Thames in something of a blind funk, thinking, I don't have a single idea in my head. How am I going to conjure up a 500-page book and a book within a book in the space of time that I have? And there was a little short period. I seem to remember it was at the end of the year, about November, December, October, November, when I really was in that state of fear. And then out of nowhere, just out of nowhere, came two words, which were family estates. Because, of course, Marble Hall Murders is about a famous writer and the estate, the books that she, Miriam Crace, has left behind her and the family she has left behind her. And I've worked with lots of estates. I've worked with the Bond estate, with the Fleming estate, with the Hergé estate, with the Agatha Christie estate. I am very aware, none of them incidentally are reflected in my book, but I am very aware of what it is like to be the great grandson or the great nephew of a famous writer. And that thought, where did it come from? It just hit me like a lightning bolt, and before the end of that walk with my dog, I knew I had the basis for Marble Hall Murders, and after that, it really was quite easy.
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about Leslie Manville, someone of such great acting stature, just kind of becoming that character and the pressure to kind of fulfill that obligation. What did the personage of Leslie Manville, kind of bring to mind and serve as a potential voice so that you really got that down on page, but still left room for your own creativity and your own instinct and craft?
Paul, I've worked with two or more great actors. I mean, Michael Kitchen on Foyle's War for all those years, and Leslie Manville for 5 years, it must have been, or 4 or 5 years, working on the trilogy of those books. Marble Hall Murders, instead, I watched last night. We're just now doing cast and crew screenings prior to its appearing on the small screen. Um, and it is one of the great joys of working with actors of that level is that it is a sort of an invisible collaboration. I describe it that way, and I'm not sure if I've chosen the right words, but what I'm trying to say is that after working with Leslie for just a short time, I began to hear in her what she liked to say, what she felt comfortable with. Same is true of Michael Kitchen, that the actors bring they don't necessarily have to say anything, but when they're just in the read-through, I'll give you a good example. Leslie had a way of delivering quite lengthy speeches, like 3 or 4 lines, with quite complicated thoughts. I seem to remember when she said that her publishing company had folded, which was quite a good way of describing a publishing company that goes bust. Folded. It's quite a good joke. And when she delivered it with the relish that told me that I should never be afraid of writing lengthy speeches with jokes in them for her, because so that lent itself to the character, where the character had a turn of mind that would launch into these sort of, little expositions with a humorous twist. With Michael, it was the exact opposite in a funny way, because I learned from him that he didn't really like talking for a great deal of time and much preferred silence. And what I remember him saying to me at the beginning, you can write 5 lines, but I can express that in a look. So with him, I learned to make Foyle quite taciturn, to let him wait, that when Foyle was investigating and talking to a suspect, he wouldn't say, "Where were you last night?" He would simply pause and wait. And somehow the suspect would say, "Look, I've got to tell you, last night I was down at the bar having a drink," or whatever, And that's 2 different approaches which the actors brought. So an invisible collaboration is one in which you don't actually meet, you don't talk about what you're going to do, but somehow you are working with these actors hand in hand and in complete trust to create the character.
Stay right there. We're only getting started. Coming up, Anthony Horowitz takes us deeper into the craft behind Marble Hall murders and the wickedly clever new A Deadly Episode, his latest book. We'll hear how he hides clues in plain sight, why he refuses to repeat himself, and what it takes to keep creating at the highest level decade after decade. For anyone who loves a great mystery, that is absolutely me, or anyone living their own second act, absolutely me, wondering whether there's still a bold new chapter ahead. You do not want to miss what's next. More with Anthony Horowitz right after this. Our guest today is author Anthony Horowitz, who's written bestsellers for the page, written for screen. Anthony Horowitz is praised for his versatile writing style and ability to adapt different genres. Such a pleasure to be talking with you, Anthony Horowitz. Thank you again for sharing your wonderful new book with me, A Deadly Episode. I've read it. I just love it. We'll have links so that our audience can go check out where to order the book from their favorite bookseller. I know it's going to be available soon. Anthony Horowitz, we so appreciate it. I want to talk to you a little bit about it, because we're talking here about Daniel Hawthorne, the character that you've written previously about. The premise is that the actor in, again, this idea of a book within a book, the actor playing Daniel Hawthorne is dead. No, I'm not going to give any no spoilers here, but the Hawthorne may have even been the intended victim within the story. It's just shaped so beautifully. What was that setup in your mind that allowed you to kind of talk a little bit about this idea of fame and acting performance and kind of this really interesting borderline between fiction and real life? Because it's really interesting how that's woven together, certainly for you in the story and then the author.
Well, the idea of A Deadly Episode actually just came out of wanting, I am in these books, of course. I am the sidekick to Hawthorne.
Yeah.
The whole setup of these books is that Hawthorne wanted a writer to chronicle his adventures and his cases, and the idea was they would split the profits 50-50. And what makes this metafiction, again to use that word, is that he approaches a real writer, and that writer is me. And in the books, my wife appears occasionally, and my family, and the fact that we're shooting this film in the book is set in Hastings, which is where Foyle's War was set. So my life is folded into it. And I've always enjoyed using bits and pieces of my life in the books. So, for example, the 4th book, Twists of a Knife, was about the theatre and about a play of mine that was massacred by the critics. And the worst of those critics in that book is murdered. And at the same time, the idea of doing, that a production company comes along and makes a TV series out of Hawthorne. And then in the shooting of that TV series, the lead actor is, as you just said, murdered. Struck me just as an idea, but it also did reflect the book within a book of Magpie Murders and that set. But this time it's a film within a book. And I just find that it just makes me smile. It's
Yeah.
the idea that, this drama is going on, surrounded by cameras and surrounded by actors, and what is real and what is fiction. It's what I've been writing about really for the last 7 or 8 years. And just to add a little twist to all this, I have now written the script of a TV series with Hawthorne and me,
Wonderful.
uh, and I'm hoping to be producing it next year.
Well, we are excited to hear that, of course.
I just hope the lead actor doesn't get killed.
Yeah, right. We'll have to be careful. We'll have to be very careful. Well, good. Well, I'll just selfishly say to you, well, please come back and talk to us about that at some point. We'd love to
I do hope
know
so.
more. Yeah. We talked a little bit about reinvention, and so many of my audience are in their second acts, as I say. I'm certainly in that category myself. I think many are interested in writing their stories in whatever shape, way, or form, and your books just do such a wonderful job of hiding clues in plain sight, in titles, anagrams, the structure, and even some of the language itself. I had to go back and reread certain passages just so that I was kind of keeping up with all of this. So I want to ask you, for aspiring writers that are listening today, what is the secret that you use to plant these clues so that we feel surprised? Because I have to say, again, I loved the book. I was just as surprised as can be by all of the plot twists and everything. I never felt cheated one bit. So what is the secret, Anthony Horowitz?
I'm not sure, actually, it is a secret, because I'm only doing what I think all the great crime writers who I admire do, which is to be completely fair with the reader. So when a murder happens, obviously the killer will leave traces of their visit to the in the scene of the crime. And my job is to describe all those traces, which are the clues, but in such a way that you may not notice that there are two ways of interpreting what you see. Now, I'll give you a clue. I'll give you, sorry, an example. In the book I'm writing at the moment, which is Hawthorne #7, one of the clues, it may not appear in the finished book, but it just took my fancy, is that a mousetrap at the scene of the crime has been smashed. It's one of those plastic mousetraps that actually trap the mouse and humanely kill it, rather than one with a spring that breaks the neck. Now, that is what I present to the reader, if it does appear in the book. And I ask you to consider, what are the circumstances that could lead to me identifying the killer by a mousetrap that has been smashed? Did the killer smash it on purpose, or did the killer smash it by mistake? Was it somebody else who smashed it? Was it smashed by the person who was killed? Obviously, because it's there must be a reason for it, and there is a reason for it, which reveals the killer, as I have just told you. But how I do it is simply that I've thought that up. I think it does work. And after this podcast is finished, you may wish to discuss amongst yourselves possibilities for why a mousetrap would do it. But don't forget, and this is the most important thing about placing a clue in a book, the mousetrap, which I have now shone a light on, so you will be aware of it, there is only one of 3 or 4 other things that you will find on the scene of the crime floor. There'll be a footprint. There will be the fact that the door has been forced, or how did somebody get the key to the door? There will be another object lying around somewhere that points to. So there'll be different things pointing in different directions. And only one of the objects that I describe, in this instance, the mousetrap, points to the killer. So just by having enough clutter around, you can hide your actual clue. I think it was Agatha Christie who said that when she put a sentence into her book that contained a big clue, she would make sure that the sentence before or the sentence after had even bigger news. So, oh my God, the vicar is dead, and that comes before or after the sentence with the clue in it. So you just think, oh my goodness, the vicar is dead, and you miss the fact that the mousetrap has been broken on the floor.
Well, again,
Does that help?
yeah, very, always. I think that, the interesting thing about these clues is that they are, as I say, I had to go back and reread certain passages just so that I could figure out the ending for myself and enjoy it. And it's so clever. Congratulations on
Well, if I may
yeah.
add that if you want, for what is my money, the greatest clue in crime fiction, go to Ira Levin's novel, A Kiss Before Dying.
Mhm.
And I don't know how to say this, but I'll just say the word blue features in the and if you read it and come to that particular sort of sentence, it's explained at the end, but it is really, really clever.
Yeah, again, a Deadly Episode is the name of Anthony Horowitz's new book. It is fantastic, such a great murder mystery. So much of your work is original to these original wonderful worlds that you're creating, but you've also stepped into some existing series, Sherlock Holmes, and certainly James Bond comes to mind. What has this idea of continuation kind of produced in you that makes you absolutely careful about honoring this tradition, but not becoming trapped by it too?
Well, the two main sets of continuation novels that I did were the James Bond trilogy, and then two books, House of Silk, which is a Sherlock Holmes mystery, and Moriarty, which is sort of a Sherlock Holmes mystery, certainly in his world. And I only agreed to do them because I love those books. I love the original Ian Fleming books. I love Conan Doyle. And what they taught me very quickly was that Doyle and Fleming are both much, much better writers than I can ever hope to be. Great originators, too. I mean, these are my total heroes. The experience taught me. Did it teach me anything? I came to the experience with the knowledge. The most important thing was not to offend the people who love those books, to stay within the envelope, to never tear the envelope, to never do anything that the authors themselves would have disapproved of. An example: it was tempting in The House of Silk to give Sherlock Holmes some love interest. But Conan Doyle explicitly says in A Scandal in Bohemia, for Sherlock Holmes, there was only ever Irene Adler. There was never another woman. So to have done that would have been to break faith with the writer, and that would be to break faith with the readers. And so I didn't learn to do these things. I came to the task of writing continuation novels with my own set of rules in place. But if you want two things I learned, it was one, how great those writers were, how much even greater than they were than I had thought, and two, how devoted people are to those great books and how strongly people, because I was traveling around the country, I was talking to people who love Holmes and Bond, and I was really amazed that literature has the power to hold people together and to make people so happy, whether they're in America or the United Kingdom or Europe or wherever. Great literature unites the world.
You're very kind. You're such a classy person too, Anthony Horowitz. So nice to give a nod to Fleming and certainly Arthur Conan Doyle. And your work is right up there. I just will say that right out loud. But I want to ask you a question, little offbeat, perhaps, kind of my style, maybe. But as a lover of all things Dales and Yorkshire and all creatures great and small, it certainly took me there as you were writing about it in A Deadly Episode. And I just want to ask you, was that some of your intention too? Because we're talking to you today in the UK, your home, and I wonder if those locations inspired you in the same way that they inspire us as we're watching some of this great television.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you cannot go to Yorkshire and not be
Yeah.
inspired. We call it God's own country,
Yeah.
and the beauty of
Yeah.
the Yorkshire Dales and the moors and the whole county is beyond my powers of description, and its immensity and its perfection and I went up there. I hadn't been up there for a while. I went there when I was writing The Sentence's Death. I was on the Yorkshire Dales because I had to go potholing. Trying to immerse myself in the story, I often find myself doing strange things. And The Sentence's Death, which is the second Hawthorne novel, has a sequence which it takes place underground where a character is potholing. So I went up there. And while I was there, I realized that this was probably where Hawthorne might have lived, in a village called Reeth. And I chose the name off the map simply because I liked the sound of it. A wreath is what you get when you're dead. So it's actually spelled R-E-E-T-H rather than W-R-E-A-T-H. But nonetheless, when I finally started to write a Deadly episode, I went to Reeth in Yorkshire. And not only did I find out where Hawthorne had lived and where his parents had been and the school that he might have gone to as a boy, all of which is revealed in the book, I just thought it was simply awe-inspiring as a piece of my country, and largely overlooked by us Southerners down here in London. And it's certainly, I think that the second half of the book gets a real kick when we move away from Hastings and away from the film set and find ourselves in this just marvelous landscape. Every minute I spent there walking, I have to say, with my wonderful black Labrador, 7 or 8 miles a day in search of locations, that visit powered the book.
It certainly wasn't lost on me, and beautiful as you describe, and then your writing just brings it to life too. Well, I have talked to you a little bit about this idea of reinvention a couple times, and I think many in my audience are thinking about their lives perhaps retrospectively, even creating a story about their own futures. But I read about you, an interesting bit of research I found about you is that you said that some ideas stay with you for years. And we talked about a couple of those kind of instances. And so I wonder if you give us perhaps some advice about when do we know that it's time to begin writing that? And what would you say to somebody who worries perhaps that they're starting too late?
There's never too late, so don't worry about that. You know, there have been writers, Alexander McCall Smith, is it? Alexander McCall, the writer of, gosh, my head is empty of names at the moment. Alexander McCall. Anyway, he started when he was 60, and he became a hugely best-selling author. Gosh, he's going to be so cross with me. He's a friend of mine, and his name has just gone out of my head. Never mind. Maybe you can cut that little bit out. It is never too late to start writing. That's the first thing. If you write 1 hour a day, in the morning, lunchtime, in the afternoon, you are a writer. And if you write 1 hour a day, every day, for shall we say 1 year, you will be a writer with a novel, a whole novel. And that self-belief, which has fueled me since I was 10 years old, has never, ever wavered or died. You know, I think writers sometimes think that they're going to be caught, they're going to be, found out as failures. And sometimes it feels that the whole world's against you. You're going to write about yourself, you're going to write this story, you're going to, what are you thinking of? You've got to listen to the voice in your own ear that says you can do it and that you will do it. And actually, at the end of the day, what's the worst that can happen? You don't get published, or you do get published and you don't sell copies. What matters is to finish the book, to just enjoy the writing. You know, for me, the best part of the book is that communion between me and those 300 pages, 85,000 words, in the room I'm sitting in now, on my own, and the rest of it, having the pleasure of being invited onto a podcast by people like yourself, or doing talks around the country, or signings, or, looking at charts, or getting royalties. All of that is great. Don't get me wrong. I love it. But it is what makes me a writer is sitting in the room. I use a fountain pen when I'm writing. It's always with a fountain pen. Here's the one I'm using at the moment, which I just bought quite recently when I was near San Francisco visiting my son. Actually, it was in Carmel, that we went down to.
Okay.
And
yeah.
This wonderful implement, the flow of ink through the nib onto the page, the formation of words, the words into pages and more pages and paragraphs and chapters and finally a book. That process to me is such a joy that anybody who is thinking about it, stop thinking, start doing.
Best-selling author Anthony Horowitz, his new book is A Deadly Episode. We'll have links so that our audience can find out more. Certainly, Anthony Horowitz, it's just been a pleasure. And as this book becomes whatever next step, we would love to have you back and talk about that, because you've just been a pleasure and so generous and giving. And
thank you.
Let you get back to your dog and your world there. But thank you for your time today.
We're done.
Congratulations on everything.
That was easy. That was really a pleasure, Roald. Your questions are great. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, my thanks to author, award-winning creator Anthony Horowitz for a truly memorable conversation. Thanks, Anthony. It was just full of wit, surprise, imagination, and the kind of hard-earned insight that speaks to readers, writers, and anyone still reaching for what comes next. Few authors have built a body of work this rich, this varied, and this enduring, from Foyle's War and Alex Rider to Daniel Hawthorne's Susan Ryland, Marble, Hall Murders, and A Deadly Episode. Anthony Horowitz keeps reminding us that a great story can entertain us, challenge us, and stay with us long after the last page. To hear this episode again, catch today's show notes, and listen to all of our previous shows, visit notold-better.com. Follow us on X at notoldbetter and on Instagram at notoldbetter for updates, behind-the-scenes information, and more from the show. This is a production, NOBS Studios. I'm your host, Paul Vogelsang. Thanks so much for listening, and please join me again next time for the Not Old Better Show. Be well, be safe. Let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show on radio and podcast. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.